How's it going, guys, and welcome to another video. In this video I'm going to be talking about a Ford Focus that showed up in the workshop recently. This was the XR5 version, so it was the turbo Ford Focus. Volvo engine presented with erratic idle, performance issues, and the engine management light on. So in this video I'm going to be showing you the step-by-step process on how I diagnosed and rectified this item. Alright, so before we jump straight into the diagnostic and repair step-by-step guide on this video, I just want to let you know that towards the end of the video I'm going to be giving you a lot of information about that part that failed. I'm also going to be showing you the exact component within that part that failed, which caused all of these issues that the customer was having. So be sure to stay to the end if you want to see all of those items. With that said, let's jump straight in to the diagnostic part of this video. Okay, so just going back over the information that the customer relayed back. Engine management light was on, erratic idle at times, and performance fuel economy issues. So with that, I brought it for a test drive, confirmed that the customer had given me the correct information, and brought it back into the workshop. I could hear the idle was erratic. I could also hear that there was a noise coming from the engine bay, which shouldn't be there. I got the scan tool out, I scanned the system, and I found that there was a lean fault code on this vehicle. So now that I've read the fault code, I have a clear indication of to what that fault may be. A lean fault code with the symptoms that's showing up and the noise I'm hearing. I decide to pop the bonnet and see what that noise is, and if I can make that audible noise change by doing two simple things. Now, what those things are is removal of the dipstick and also the oil cap. You can loosen off the oil cap. If you start to hear an idle change, a noise change, you are pretty much guaranteed that it's going to be a PCV valve failure. With that, I look for the PCV valve in this vehicle, and it is located in the oil filter housing assembly. It is all together, it is the one unit, and it is located at the front of the engine on the lower side. And that gives me all the information I need to confirm that a PCV valve has failed on this. So the first part of this video is going to be me showcasing the step-by-step process of how I removed and refitted the new part. On this particular vehicle, after consulting with the customer, it was replacement of the whole assembly, because that is the only part that was available. The customer needed the vehicle back straight away. That part was available on the day, and we were able to do a very quick turnaround for the customer, so they would not be interrupted for work or any other problems with their vehicle off the road. So I disconnect the hose clamps on the air intake pipe that's on the rear of the engine, both the front one and the rear one. It's also held in by two 10mm bolts. I take off this battery cover, which allows access to the lower part here where the other 10mm is kept in. That's the two bolts out now, and the pipe is able to be taken out. I had some of the front plastics removed before this part, so you could get a visual. I disconnect that pipe there, and then I go and get my Torx. It is a T30 that I use to remove this top cover. I put it on the impact and on a wobble joint to get at the back ones there, but I ratchet will do the same thing. I take off the cover and then I disconnect the breather pipe on the top side. That connects all the way down into the housing. I leave it attached for the meantime, and then I set about taking off that cover and disconnecting the battery. The reason I disconnect the battery is these electrical connectors here. There is 2 of them. You want to push down and pull back on both of those. Once they're free, there will be some components on the lower side that you need to remove so you can get the air box to go to the side, including this Torx head. I just use my Torx keys and I get down. It's tough, it's a tight spot to remove this, but you will need to disconnect these items so the air box can be moved to the side. Now, I don't have a visual of the air box being removed completely and moved to the side because the battery died on my camera at that time, but essentially you pull the air box up and move it to the side. I'm now on the lower part of the engine.
If you look up here, you've got these 3 tin mils that need to be removed. 1, 2, 3. The brackets you could see from the top, so the where the dipstick goes into, that connects to the housing, and then we've got these connecting brackets for, looks like loom routing and potentially aircon pipes as well. So we just make sure we have all of those disconnected. There's also a what looks to be a 10 mil up the top side there that has to come out, but what I'm going to do with the oil filter housing, with the top cap left loose, I'm going to now drain the oil, and that will save some of the mess that's going to come out of this afterwards. So I'm going to drain this out completely now.
So I have the oil draining, I put the sump plug back in afterwards and tighten it up, and then I set about loosening all the components on the lower side, including these 10 mil bolts that are held in down there. Back on the top side again, you can see I have the air box moved to the right hand side now, and there is a lot more room. On the top of the housing, there is an electrical connector that has to be removed away, and then the pipes that connect to the housing need to be detached. I completely remove one of them and I leave the other one on the housing. I take out all the bolts that are remaining on the top side and then remove the oil filler cap. And there is only one item left, which is a basically a push-in clip on the left-hand side of the housing. So I use my trim removal tool, and that allows access for it to be pulled all the way out. You then need to make sure the surface is completely clean of any debris, which I set about doing there. And then I just compare the new one. I make sure that the new one is the exact same, and that's the PCV valve that I'm tapping on there, and that is the complete assembly. I take off the pipe that was remaining on it that was well jammed on. I use a needle nose pliers for that, pop it on, and then it is all about reinstall. Highly recommend hand tightening all the bolts before you start to tighten any. Line them all up, because the top side one on the right hand side is quite tricky to get in, but you want to have all of those hand tight before pinching any of them down. It's the very simple process of reinstall, so you want to make sure everything is reinstalled again. You can see here that the pipes are back on, electrical connector is back on, and I have everything tightened back up. The air breather box just needs to be moved to the side now, and then once I have that done, I run the engine and I make sure that there is no oil leaks or that there is no issues around the top side. I put it up in the air and I make sure that there's no issues on the lower side as well. So I have the vehicle running for quite a while and monitoring the oil situation and any noises. The lower side here, this is after the vehicle is running for about 15 or 20 minutes. No oil has presented back, and then I bring it for a road test, make sure that there is no Fault code's coming back and the vehicle is now running like it should. Once I am happy with the test drive, the vehicle is performing right and everything is good, I'm ready to give the vehicle back to the customer again. So now that you've seen how that is all done and how it was put back together, I wanted to show with the oil filter housing PCV valve assembly what actually failed. So I'm going to bring it over to the vise, I'm going to open up that unit and I'm going to show you what's failed, and then I'm also going to talk about the components that can fail mechanically if you have an issue like this on your vehicle. So I'm just popping the cap off. Use the lever just to rest against the body and that little channel that's in there, flat screwdriver, just to lift it up off its seat. And then it's just about going around the rest. And there's another section just on the opposite side that we need to release as well. Okay, so that is the cap off safely. That's the cap removed safely, no damage to it. Perfectly intact. You want to be cautious when removing that if you have any plans to repair. But if you can see right in on this section here, you can see where the diaphragm is split. So right on the top there we have the fault that happened. And that's the spring. And it's just this little piece here that has failed. So if you wanted to rebuild this component, it is possible. You can do a part search online and get this piece separate, and you could rebuild this. Obviously the housing itself, you're going to need to be replacing all of the seals on it. Give it a good clean up, new oil filter before everything would be reinstalled. But that is the failure item, and that is the part that caused this housing to fail and for this component to have to be replaced. So having it all disassembled, we know what has failed in it. The diaphragm has failed on the top side. It has split all the way through and was allowing air to pass by in the system. That item can be replaced and this whole housing unit could be repaired. That repair will not be done in a quick turnaround, and therefore the customer needed the vehicle back straight away, and the only part available was the complete housing assembly. Ford does not sell that part separately. I'm not sure of Volvo, I don't believe they do either, but the part can be sourced online if you have time to wait and you're not relying on your vehicle to keep driving. In this case, it was a complete unit that was replaced, but if you did rebuild, you could replace this, clean up that whole assembly on the inside, make sure that everything is nice and clean in there. The oil filter would be replaced along with the O-ring, and these seals here would be replaced. That one and the lower ones on the bottom side of the housing, they must be replaced. You don't want to put this all back together and find that you have oil leaks leaking afterwards, because it would be the job repeated all over again. So that is it, guys. That is why the item has failed. That is what you can do if you have this vehicle and you want to rectify it yourself. You have a couple of different options depending on time and availability of parts in your area. Alright, so after seeing that, you can see a simple thing like a diaphragm like this item here can cause a lot of problems on your vehicle. This actual diaphragm part is from a Holden Chevy Cruze that I worked on recently. It was inbuilt in the rocker cover. It's one of my last videos that I did, and that could not be replaced on its own. It had to be the whole rocker cover assembly itself to fix that item. Now, if that happens on your vehicle, mechanical failures that can happen afterwards are the following. Now, first of all, you could have an engine light. That engine light will be related to a lean fuel mix because of incorrect fuel trims being recorded. So your fuel trims are gone out of spec. That throws it off. You get a lean fuel mix fault or an air intake performance fault, something like that, and that's why your engine light gets triggered. So I just want to talk about PCV valve failures and how they can have a detrimental knock-on effect should they fail. I'm first going to talk about a personal experience that I had with a customer who had been to another workshop. They had a Volkswagen Polo that had high emissions. It had failed the national car test back in Ireland twice, and the workshop that it was going into had replaced parts to no success. The parts that were replaced was the catalytic converter, number one. It went back for the test and it failed again. They replaced the oxygen sensors after that, or oxygen sensor, and it still failed, so it went twice. They decided to do the spark plugs as a third because they were unsure at this stage what could be causing it, and the spark plugs went for an independent test before it went for the retest this time, and again it failed. So this had 3 emissions failures and 2 national car test failures as it showed up in our workshop. I had the fail sheets. I also knew the items that went in, and I went about my own diagnostic to see what could be the problem. I pulled off the PCV valve pipe, and I could see that it was absolutely clogged with that sludge type mayonnaise material that builds up. I took the whole assembly apart, brought it to the bench, and I cleaned it out. Took a little while, but I was able to get everything out of the system, and I put it all back together again. And when I done that, I brought it for an independent emissions test, as I didn't have one of those in the workshop, and the levels dropped down to normal immediately. I didn't have to replace any parts. I didn't have to do anything else. All I did was clean out the system and see what it would do, and it dropped down to that normal level. After that, I booked it for the test straight away. Within 2 days, the vehicle had been completely rectified, and the customer now had a cert and was able to drive on the road legally again. That workshop was unable to detect that fault and caused the customer a lot of extra cost, said that they had to be replaced anyways, and the customer was unsure of the information being correct or not. Incorrect diagnosis of a PCV valve can lead to a lot of expensive parts being replaced. The mechanical failures that can happen afterwards can be very expensive to the customer, and the quicker you have the problem solved, the better chance you have of having no issues down the road. For example, crankcase ventilation, if that is not working correctly, that will mean you have a high pressure buildup. A high pressure buildup will lead to oil seals leaking, and you will now have a dry engine turned to an engine soaked in oil should those oil seals leak afterwards. Oil seals can be very expensive because of labor times to repair. The seals itself can be very cheap, but where they are, or the components that have to be removed to correct them items, can be very, very expensive. So you definitely don't want that happening to you on your vehicle. The sludge and oil buildup that can happen from a PCV valve failure can lead to the likes of your oil pickup strainer being blocked or partially blocked. And if that happens, we all know that your oil pressure can drop. You can have low oil pressure because it's not pulling it like it should. Low oil pressure can be detrimental to your engine, can cause mechanical failures, and oil warning lights can come on. And if it's a turbo engine, you could have restriction going to your oil feed, causing bearing issues, or oil turbo seal failures as well. So them items can be very, very costly. Just talking about the emission side of it, it is an emissions related part. It helps recirculation within the crankcase caused by blow-by. If you want to look into PCV valve functions completely, I'd recommend looking those up. But to break it down very quickly, the PCV valve just acts as a ventilation which recirculates. So the positive crankcase pressure that builds up, it releases that, it allows it somewhere to go, recirculates it in, and keeps your emissions correct. Should that not be working, you have them, you can have oil build up in your air intake pipes, you can have an oil soaked air filter. That's another cause of a PCV valve failure. You can see that happen too. And that is it, guys. A PCV valve failure can lead to expensive items like this housing assembly being replaced, rocker covers being replaced, or later on down the road, expensive mechanical failure. So it is a very important part of your engine, and it needs to be maintained and working correctly, or you could have costly repairs down the road. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful and informative. If you did, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.